This is Wuhan, China, a megacity with more than 10 million people, a city that was caught off guard completely by the novel coronavirus in the beginning of this new decade. The city was later put to a complete lockdown and thousands of people lost their lives. What you're seeing here is just unprecedented. It is a catastrophe. Yet during this most difficult time, we Chinese people have demonstrated tremendous amount of courage, determination, and responsibility. I made this video because I was actually motivated the night I downloaded a social app. I initially just wanted to feel its business model and figure out why it took off like a rocket and became an internet giant. Many of the feeds I got on that platform are related to the Chinese people fighting against this coronavirus. That night actually turned out to be sleepless for me because I just couldn't stop watching those videos, and my eyes are pretty much all wet throughout the night. So I decided to piece them together and attach to it my personal thoughts. The goal, I think, is twofold. I want to thank and salute all the Chinese people who are right now fighting this coronavirus. And I also hope to make our Chinese voice heard on the world stage. And that's why I'm recording this in English. I was touched the most by seeing the Chinese people rally together as a nation. In the beginning, the situation in Wuhan was dire, and we were losing Chinese lives. But when we realized that we didn't have enough beds in hospitals to take care of those infected, this is what happened. Yes, we built a hospital from scratch within less than 10 days, and we built a dozen more within less than a month. You tell me any other country in the world can do this. This is what China is all about. When we realized that we didn't have enough medical professionals in Wuhan, this is what happened. More than 42,000 medical professionals from across the country rushed to the epicenter by air, by land, because they wanted to save Chinese lives. Take a look. We have this hospital director sending her post-90 generation staff to the epicenter. And we have this 90 years old Chinese medicine doctor gearing up and serving his country. We have this wife not wanting to let go of her husband's hands. It is heartbreaking to say all this because this deadly virus could mean a one-way trip for all of them. Yet they didn't walk away, not at all. They all put their country first, and they put their family behind. This is what China is all about. In China, we all know our military can be calling it on during most difficult times. Once again, they proved that. Our military from across the country was mobilized on the Chinese New Year Eve. They stepped up and took over the two busiest hospitals with the most dangerous tasks. And this is, once again, what China is all about. I understand there has been some concerns over the conditions in the makeshift hospitals, but let's take a look what's really happening in there. It's not what you thought, right? They're actually having fun in there. The nurse with the protective gear is teaching the patients to dance. And here we have another one, a karaoke contest. So the medical professionals are not just taking care of their health, they're entertaining the patients to boost their morale. And when their patients recover, they finally got some time to entertain themselves. And that is the best dance I've ever seen in my entire life. And take a look at the patient's reaction when they're discharged. It's obvious how satisfied and how grateful they are. And this is the cabin attendant thanking a plane of medical professionals flying to her hometown to save lives. And not just to her, all the Chinese people witnessed how they put their lives at risk on the battlefield, we can't express how grateful we are to your great service of our country, your incredible bravery, determination, and sacrifice. They all represent what China is really all about. And of course, some would argue it wasn't all that good in the beginning of the outbreak. For that, I admit things were pretty bad in the beginning because we had too many patients but not enough resources. But what I think really matters is, number one, can you quickly respond to a crisis of this magnitude and take decisive measures? And this is actually the government's role. Number two, do you actually have the capacity to ramp up to make sure your healthcare system is not going to get overwhelmed? Fortunately, China had the two. As I've just shown you, when we realized how bad the situation was in Wuhan, the Chinese government quickly made the decision and ramped up its capacity that actually astonished the world. Unfortunately, if you don't have the two, your ability to contain this pandemic is going to get limited. Let's take a look at what's happening right now in Italy. Its healthcare system is obviously getting overwhelmed, yet they don't have the capacity that we have to ramp up. As a result, they're losing about 600 lives every single day since last week. So my point is, the chaotic time in the beginning is probably somewhat inevitable. It's basically governed by the supply and demand law. What really can turn things around is your government and your resources. We Chinese people have witnessed the handling of this crisis by our government. And quite frankly, we all feel so proud and fortunate to be a Chinese. I also wanted to bring to your attention something that barely gets covered by the Western media. That is, all the tests and medical expenses that you incur during hospitalization are actually covered by the Chinese government. So you don't have to pay a penny out of your own pocket. It is free. This is huge because after the initial chaotic time, the patients were all hospitalized, not sent home. And the number you're looking at is a whopping 50,000 patients in the city of Wuhan alone. The more important implication, I think, is that you don't have to worry about that you can't afford the treatment, so you don't have to wait and self-resolve, which is dangerous because you can spread the disease while waiting. Speaking of this, some government's intention to adopt the so-called herd immunity as a policy to handle this pandemic is pretty interesting. Just a little bit background. Here's how herd immunity works. You need to have about 60% of your population getting infected by the virus. And then, if they can survive, this is a big if, they become immune to it and won't get it twice. This way, it can eventually stop the spread. So what's wrong with it? Well, let's do the math. 60% of your population and an estimate of 3% mortality rate, and given a population of 60 million people, looks like the government is pretty comfortable of letting 1 million people die. You might think this is pretty cruel, but it has its underlying causes. So, if you use China's approach, which relies on widespread testing, tracking down the contacts of every single confirmed case and quarantine them, think about how much budget you need to support this, let alone the medical expenses in hospitals. You're looking at billions and billions of dollars. Imagine, when the Treasury Department is crunching the numbers, they really can't do much by themselves to stay ahead of the curve. This is really the time that calls for international cooperation, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. China has already demonstrated no matter how formidable the coronavirus might appear, it's not invincible. The situation was pretty dire about a month ago, but now we got it under control. The Chinese people understand in a global crisis like this, we're more dependent on each other than ever before. That's why immediately after we got the corona under control, we're sending our medical professionals as well as vital medical equipment to the countries that are suffering right now, because we wanted to help. As a matter of fact, we're helping dozens of countries now, including Italy, Spain, Serbia, Pakistan, just to name a few. And the Chinese government is committed to supporting 82 countries around the globe that either need medical personnel or medical equipment. I also wanted to reach out to our Chinese people. Even though we know we're caring, we're kind, we love to help others, but let's not assume that everybody else knows that. We need to get the message out more proactively. I think this is the time for us to reconnect to the world, and especially to the West. In other words, this is the time for us to rebuild our international image. This is the kind of softer part I think we didn't pay much attention to in the past. Partially because of our culture, we're not so aggressive in nature and we're kind of introverted. But I believe if people actually see our Chinese people risking our lives to save their lives, I think most of the people, even those who previously have prejudice on China, would change their mind. They will come to realize that this friendship is sincere, genuine, and for real. Indeed, this is actually having an effect. Let's take a listen. This is the Italian people singing our Chinese national anthem to express their gratitude. This is the president of Serbia, kissing our Chinese national flag at the airport when the Chinese medical team arrived in his country. What a moment of humanity. On the other hand, we have to say when we're fighting against the virus, we heard a lot of not-so-friendly voices from the West. But remember, our common enemy is the coronavirus. And this is not a time to scapegoat anyone, any country, to deflect the blame. For that matter, I hope the media and some politicians can stop using xenophobic rhetoric because people need the right guidance, especially in a time of heightened emotions like this. But if we give a second thought, this is no surprise because no country in the world can be free of vicious attack. So if we think it that way and take it lightly, we shouldn't feel frustrated, and we should keep on doing the right thing and helping the world and helping the people in need. Lastly, I wanted to urge our Western friends to put aside your stereotype if you have any, and to start to look at China using a whole new different perspective. Because the China today is no longer the China you knew 50 years ago. I wanted to end my recording by sharing with you one encouraging news. Today, the city of Wuhan, the epicenter, lifted its 2 months lockdown. People are coming out and resuming their normal activities. Again, the coronavirus is not invincible. If the whole world comes together, there's going to be nothing that can stand in our way in defeating this coronavirus. I believe at the end of the tunnel, you always see the light. I'm a Chinese, a proud Chinese. Thank you.